I woke up this morning and it feels like the world's burning all over again. Every headline, every update, just pure chaos. And guess who's at the center of it this time? Trump. He's back, and he's taking fresh aim at China like a man on a mission to start another global storm. You couldn't script this level of drama. He's spiraling again, furious that Beijing dared to hit back. But honestly, what did he expect? No major power is going to just sit quietly and let your tariffs crush their economy. So here we go again. The global chessboard is shaking, and China just made its next powerful move. Beijing has officially tightened its grip on rare earth exports, adding 5 more crucial elements to its restricted list. These aren't small-time materials. They're the backbone of modern technology. The secret ingredients inside everything from smartphones and missiles to electric vehicles. On top of that, China now demands foreign semiconductor makers and defense companies get explicit approval before using any Chinese-sourced material in their final products. Without that, no exports. Essentially, Beijing just mirrored Trump's own chip sanctions and turned the supply chain into a geopolitical weapon. And with the Korea summit right around the corner, China's clearly fortifying its position and stacking up leverage like a grandmaster preparing for checkmate. The real problem here? America's not ready. Not even close. Trump charged into this trade war with zero preparation. No contingency plan, no strategy, just bravado. It's like he declared economic war without realizing the other side holds the ammunition. And China's leverage isn't theoretical, it's real, it's tangible. Just a few months ago, a factory in Chicago had to shut its doors because it ran out of rare earth magnets. From samarium to scandium, China dominates over 90% of the global supply chain. The scraps that remain? Controlled by nations like Russia and Vietnam, allies and partners within the BRICS sphere. So when China tightens the valve, American industry suffocates almost instantly. And the financial markets? Absolute carnage. A sea of red. The S&P 500 tanked 3%, the Nasdaq crashed 6%, and within hours panic spread like wildfire. What started as political posturing turned into full-blown market chaos. Trump might think he's creating bargaining power, but what he's really done is knock over a domino that could trigger a worldwide financial collapse. Then he drops his latest grenade, a 100% tariff on all Chinese goods, starting November 1st, just 3 weeks from now. He calls China's export restrictions a moral outrage to the global order. Seriously? This from the same man who launched a global tariff crusade. The irony is thick enough to cut with a knife. And he didn't stop there. Trump also announced new export controls on critical software, a direct jab at semiconductor design systems used across global tech industries. But this move won't cripple China's progress, it'll accelerate it. By forcing them to innovate independently, he's basically fast-tracking their self-reliance. And anyone who thinks Beijing won't strike back again hasn't been paying attention. Maybe Trump's angry he didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize, who knows anymore. But the consequences of his tantrum are devastating. Crypto investors are watching their portfolios evaporate. Chinese stocks are taking heavy hits. But it's US equities that are bleeding the hardest. In just 40 minutes, over $1.2 trillion in market value vanished from the S&P 500. Traders who thought they were being clever, buying the dip, got obliterated. It was the ultimate rug pull, engineered by the president himself. The market was already dangerously inflated, waiting for a trigger, and Trump delivered it in spectacular fashion. The question now is whether Wall Street can even recover from this self-inflicted wound. Even heavyweights like Scott Besson are visibly nervous. He knows what's happening. The trade war has unleashed a monster, and now the beast is clawing back at an unprepared US economy. Here's the brutal truth. Taking on China's industrial dominance is a losing fight. America's manufacturing backbone depends on rare earths, and China owns the tap. Trump's solutions to secure domestic supply chains are half measures at best. The White House recently pumped $36 million into a 10% stake in Trilogy Metals, hoping to dig up rare earths in Alaska. Sounds patriotic, sounds decisive, but it's a mirage. Mining in the US is far more expensive than in China. Worse, most of the mining equipment itself comes from abroad and is now being slapped with Trump's own tariffs. It's like building a wall around your house, then realizing you've locked yourself inside. The result? Sky-high production costs. Any rare earths mined domestically will cost a fortune, forcing downstream industries, automakers, chip plants, defense contractors, to pay inflated prices. And China still holds all the leverage. They could flood the market with cheap supply, crush global prices, and expand their dominance even further. Meanwhile, the US would be stuck endlessly subsidizing its inefficient mining sector just to stay afloat. In 2024, China accounted for 70% of global rare earth output, producing around 270,000 metric tons, while the US barely scraped together 40,000. China can play this game forever. They have nearly half the world's reserves. The US? Just 4%. Competing with that is like bringing a squirt gun to a forest fire. At this point, I honestly don't know what reality Trump's living in, because it's definitely not this one. And if you thought the rare earth situation was bad, just wait. The tariff war is still escalating. Trump's reportedly reconsidering his decision to cancel the meeting with President Xi, maybe realizing he's cornered himself. Meanwhile, the US government is in partial shutdown. Jobless claims are climbing. Economic data is frozen. Goldman Sachs estimates unemployment claims rose to 235,000 last week, an increase of 11,000. Nearly 250,000 federal workers are wandering without paychecks, and Trump's even threatening to deny back pay to some of them. So here we are, a global trade war spiraling out of control, markets in freefall, factories on edge, and a government barely functioning. This isn't strategy anymore, it's chaos in motion. And through it all, one thing's become painfully obvious. Trump didn't just start a fight with China. He's picked a fight with the entire global economy, and reality itself is fighting back. Trump's newest confrontation with China is erupting right in the middle of America's government shutdown madness. Because apparently, chaos just isn't enough anymore. The tension between Washington and Beijing is back on full blast, and the big question now is, what happens if Trump actually slams a 100% tariff wall on Chinese imports? Who ends up footing the bill for that? Here's the truth, it won't be China. They've already diversified, rerouting their trade lines across Asia, Africa, and Europe. While Chinese exports to the United States have plunged by around 30%, their global exports have risen by 7 to 10%. That's an even bigger victory for Beijing. Meanwhile, American consumers and US corporations are left to absorb the shock. According to Goldman Sachs, US households will shoulder nearly 70% of the total tariff burden. In simple terms, if the price of a product jumps by $10, American consumers will eat $7 of that increase. Businesses will take on roughly 15% more in production costs, forcing them to either hike prices, cut jobs, or both. And if they don't, the rising cost of raw materials and imports will crush their profit margins, leading to layoffs and potential bankruptcies. But here's the thing, the real impact hasn't even begun. The inflationary wave you're seeing now is just the warning tremor before the quake. We're still climbing the curve, and the full brunt will slam into everyday life soon. Grocery bills, electronics, fuel, and clothing prices are all set to skyrocket. If tariffs on Chinese goods jump to 100%, that would be an economic gut punch, unlike anything Americans have seen in decades. Up to this point, US consumers have absorbed only 22% of the tariff cost. Soon, that figure is expected to explode to 67%. That's a threefold surge in financial pain hitting store shelves. Meanwhile, American corporations' share of the burden will nosedive from 64% to just 10%. The outcome will be brutal: falling demand, higher prices, shrinking profits, and a potential consumer collapse. And through it all, China sits back, patient and calculating. They're not panicking, they're strategizing. Sure, they might retaliate by raising their own tariffs on American exports to astronomical levels, but honestly, they don't even need to. US goods are already overpriced and uncompetitive in China's markets. Yet, Washington continues to insist that tariffs are some clever tool to punish China, ignoring that they are, in reality, a tax on Americans. Economists and analysts across the board, from Goldman Sachs to independent trade experts, agree that this strategy is backfiring spectacularly. China, meanwhile, is playing a long game, a strategic chess match, while the US seems to be stumbling through a game of snakes and ladders, rolling dice blindfolded and hoping for luck. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get more intense, Beijing pulled its next move, one straight from the geopolitical playbook. Remember the Panama Canal port controversy? The US once tried to seize control of key global ports from C.K. Hutchison to trap China's shipping network and force its vessels to pay steep docking fees at US-controlled hubs. Well, Beijing just turned that strategy upside down. In a sharp counterpunch, China announced it will begin imposing special port fees on all US-flagged ships entering Chinese harbors, starting in just 3 days. The charges begin at 400 RMB per net ton and will escalate each year until they top 100 RMB by April. For a 100,000-ton American cargo ship, that's over $10 million in fees, straight into China's pocket. But that's only part of the story. China has added a web of new restrictions that are designed to choke U.S. shipping operations. The grand plan to have South Korean shipbuilders construct vessels for the U.S.? Completely dead. When the world's largest manufacturing power decides to reject American ships, there's little incentive left to keep building them. And while the new fees will generate millions, that's not the endgame. The true target is the U.S. maritime industry itself. Any ship built in the U.S., flying an American flag, or majority owned by American firms will now fall under these new levies. In total, over 11 million gross tons of U.S. shipping are now at risk of heavy taxation. So what's the next move? Some American companies might re-register their vessels under flags of convenience, maybe Panama, maybe even China. But the damage is already done. The uncertainty alone is enough to scare off foreign investors and shipbuilders. The U.S. tried to dominate the world's sea routes. Now Beijing is using the same strategy to trap Washington in its own net. This isn't just about squeezing a few $1 million in port fees. It's about tightening control, slowing trade, and making it more painful for the U.S. to engage economically with China. Welcome to the era of economic warfare. Every move is being countered with precision. The U.S. fires a tariff, and China fires back with regulation. Washington blocks chip exports, and Beijing restricts rare earth minerals. It's tit for tat, a global tug-of-war with no clear winner yet. In September alone, U.S. container imports dropped 8.4% year-on-year, but shipments from China collapsed by a staggering 23%. That's a massive blow to China's exporters, yet Beijing isn't backing down. Instead, they're rolling out new non-tariff barriers, tighter customs checks, licensing delays, port levies, and complex trade procedures, all meant to make it painful and expensive for American products to enter China's markets. In simple terms, if Washington makes trade harder for Beijing, Beijing will make trade excruciating for Washington. Maybe that's why, out of nowhere, Trump suddenly hinted at another meeting with President Xi, a move that shocked even his closest advisors. It was completely out of the blue, and you could almost feel the panic behind it. The U.S. knows it's losing leverage, and the sudden shift reeks of desperation more than diplomacy. So here we are, watching a global power play unfold like a circus. Policies are being made on impulse, trade decisions are being announced mid-tweet, and the entire economy feels like it's running on confusion and chaos. If you can still look at this situation and take it seriously, I genuinely salute you. Because right now, it feels less like global strategy and more like a clown show in slow motion. One where logic is gone, accountability is missing, and everyone's pretending it's fine while the system burns. So what's your take? Will Trump really crank tariffs on China past 100% again? And if he does, how will Beijing strike back next time? Share your thoughts in the comments, stay alert, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because this roller coaster isn't slowing down anytime soon. The global economy is shifting, the rules are changing, and we're all passengers watching the sparks fly.